Lab 9 is our first of several evolution labs. And in this lab, we are going to look at the causes of population change. So before I start talking about the lab, I want to review 3 definitions for you. And if you have not yet watched the videos for this chapter, for chapter 10, I strongly encourage you to do that because this is not a hard lab, but without the foundation and understanding of the process of evolution, students often get confused about what's happening. So if you are doing this lab at home and haven't done the chapter yet, I suggest that you wait and do this lab after you do chapter 10. So let's talk about a couple of things. Evolution essentially has 2 different definitions. The first definition is that evolution is change in a population over time. So today we are going to look at how the frequency of a particular trait changes over several generations of organisms. Now we can also look at population, and we'll do this next week, as a change in allele frequency, because evolution requires that there be a genetic component. Evolutionary change only happens in a population when the information that is changing is stored at the DNA level. So there has to be a gene that is causing the particular trait that we're looking at. But we'll come back to that later. Today we are going to look at evolution as just a change in a population over time, and we are going to be looking at the change in fur color of mice in a particular environment. Now, evolution can happen by chance, or it can be directed. So chance events that might cause evolution to occur are changes in weather, natural disasters, human impact, things like that are not causing evolution to happen in a particular direction or because individuals have a particular trait. When evolution happens by chance, we see changes that happen regardless of the particular characteristics that an individual has. Essentially, it is change that happens because somebody's in the wrong place at the wrong time, or because somebody's in the right place at the right time. However, very commonly, evolution is a directed process, and it is directed by natural selection. So natural selection is the process where organisms with specific traits survive and reproduce more than other organisms without those traits. So the process of natural selection allows individuals who are better adapted to their environment to survive and reproduce at a higher frequency. So essentially, natural selection is the mechanism that one of the mechanisms that can cause evolutionary change. Because when an organism with that specific trait that is advantageous allows them to survive and reproduce, that trait is going to become more common in the population. And here we get to adaptation. Adaptation is the process by which an organism becomes better adapted becomes better able to survive in their habitat. So you can also think of adaptation as the actual trait or the specific type of trait that an organism has that allows them to survive better. So evolution is a change in a population over time. Sometimes it occurs by chance, and later in chapter 10 and next week we'll explore the ways that evolution happens by chance. But today we're looking at natural selection, where organisms with specific traits survive and reproduce better than others because of those traits. So today we are looking at mice with very specific fur colors, and those mice that have the fur color that allows them to hide in their environment are going to survive better and produce more offspring than those that do not have that camouflaging color. So natural selection leads to adaptation, and that is where an organism or a species becomes better able to survive in their environment because of specific traits. So this all goes back to those specific traits that an organism has. Now, for evolution to occur, those traits must have a genetic basis. So fur color must be encoded in these mice in order for natural selection, adaptation, and evolution to change the population. So for this lab, you should access the data that is provided for lab number 9 on Blackboard. And in that data, you are going to find images of a quote-unquote environment. It's essentially a fabric cloth that we've laid on the table, and we have scattered dots, hole punch dots basically, of different colors, and those dots are going to represent mice. Now we're going to start out with mice of 10 different colors, all in equal proportions, and we are going to simulate the process of evolution by predation. So predation means that an organism hunts and eats another organism or its prey. So the predator in our simulation here is going to be a hawk. The hawk is going to come through and eat a specific number of mice by removing them from the environment in each round. So this is kind of a game this week. So you're going to have the hawk eat a specific number of organisms that is specified in your lab, and that's going to count as one round. So you'll start with 100 mice in your population, and unless I give you different instructions, but if you're doing this online in quarantine, you are probably going to be doing the 10 mice. 10 mice of each color. The hawk is going to eat 75 mice each round. Now, if you're doing this as a review for doing it in class, your numbers might be a little bit different. But if you're doing this fully online, just go with what your lab says. So for our online lab, we are going to start with 100 mice, 10 of each color. The hawk is going to, in the first round, eat 75 of these mice. You'll be left with 25 survivors. So you'll fill out your data chart like this. This isn't the full data chart because I did insert something above it. But you'll start with all of these colors plus a few more, 10 of each color. And you are going to pick out 75 individuals that are going to be eaten. You're going to be left with 25 survivors. So let's say that you have 2 black mice that survive. Now we're going to let these mice reproduce, and you're going to put back into your next simulation the number of survivors. So the number of survivors is actually going to be, the number that you put back is going to be the number of survivors plus their offspring. So to figure out the number of offspring, you are going to multiply your number of survivors times 3, because for every survivor, you're adding 3 dots back in. So we're going to start with 2 survivors. We're going to multiply that by 3, which means we are going to put, we're going to have 6 offspring. So the total number that we start with in the next generation is going to be our survivors plus their offspring. So if we have 2 black mice survive, we are going to multiply that by 3 for 6 offspring and put back the 2 original survivors plus their 6 offspring for a total of 8. So let's say that in our environment we had 5 brown individuals survive. To get our number of offspring, we're going to multiply that by 3 for a total of 15. So to put back, we're going to put back our survivors plus their 15 offspring for a total of 20 individuals for the next round of our simulation. So we'll do this 3 times. Each time you need to make sure that you have 100 individuals for the start of your round. If you don't have 100 individuals, check your math and make sure that you have counted correctly from your data. You've put back in the correct number on your sheet as went back in the data that we gave you. So once you're finished, you're going to have to graph your data. So we are going to be using a line graph, one for each mouse color. And we're going to ask you to do a couple of things. You're going to set a scale for the y-axis. Now, your entire population, your entire graph must fit within your graph sheet. If it doesn't, you need to renumber. You need to set a proper scale so that all of your data fits. Then you need to give us a description for what the y-axis stands for. The y-axis stands for the number of mice at the start of the population. I'm sorry, the number of mice at the start of the round. So to begin graphing this, you also need to include a key. Now this is especially important if you don't have all of the colors at home, and if you don't, that's okay, but you do need to somehow indicate the different colors on your graph. So I'm going to just start labeling. You will have to label however is appropriate for your graph. I'm just going to do a couple of lines here. So all of your mice in round 1 are going to start at 10. So we said that we started with 10 mice, we had 2 survivors, and we put back in 8. So I'm just going to estimate that 8 is approximately there. So my first line is going from 10 down from 8. Then after that, we said that we had 5 brown survivors, and we are going to start the next round with 20. So we started round 1 with 10. After round 1, we have 20 brown mice. So this will continue for each of your colors. You may notice that some of them drop off really quickly. And if that's the case, your line is just going to go, excuse me, your line is just going to go right down to 0, and that's okay. You will probably have several that are lost right away, but you do need to indicate that you start at 10, you go down to 0, so you start your next round at 0. And of course, you don't put any back in, so we're done with that one. For the remaining rounds, we're just going to continue. So the next generation starts with, for the black, at 8. Let's say that this one goes up to 20 and then up to something higher after that. And then maybe our brown mice stay steady and then go up a little bit the next round. So you'll graph all of your mice in this manner. And then once you're done with your graphing, you do have some questions to answer. And then in the last section, we're actually simulating a chance event. So we're not going to graph this one, but you are going to go through, do a couple of generations, and keep in mind that in this chance event, organisms are not selected because of specific traits. They live or die based on their proximity to a shelter in a forest fire. So pay extra attention to your answers for that one. Think about the definitions that I gave you. Think about the process that's happening. Remember that evolution does not have to occur via natural selection and adaptation.